Hello, and welcome to the replay of our live Q&A about photography workshops aboard the David B. I'm Christine, and I recently got together with Captain Jeffrey, Sarah, our reservation specialist, and photographers John D'Onofrio and Alan Sanders to take you behind the scenes of our photography workshops. Whether you're just starting out with a camera or you've been chasing the perfect shot for years, our trips are designed to inspire your creativity and deliver unforgettable experiences. Jeffrey, Sarah, and I look forward to sharing more about our trips, and we are excited for you to hear from John and Al about their passion for photography and the stunning destinations we explore. Whether you're just starting out with a camera or you've been chasing the perfect shot for years, our trips are designed to inspire your creativity and deliver unforgettable experiences. But before we go on, I'd like to give you a quick overview of our workshops where each one offers a different kind of inspiration. Our first trip takes you deep into Southeast Alaska and the Tongass National Forest to visit the Kootznoowoo Wilderness and the Coastal Brown Bear Observatory at Pat Creek on Admiralty Island. After spending time with the bears, we're off to explore the Tracy Arm Ford's Terror Wilderness south of Juneau. These locations offer stunning opportunities to photograph wildlife and dramatic landscapes. Our second trip focuses on Glacier Bay National Park, one of Alaska's most iconic destinations. The massive glaciers, rugged terrain, and abundant wildlife make it a photographer's paradise. Our third trip brings us to the San Juan Islands of Washington State. This area is known for its serene beauty, unique marine ecosystems, and stunning coastal vistas. We believe that our workshops are so much more than just photography trips. They're about building connections, finding inspiration, and creating unforgettable memories. So grab your camera and join us as we dive into what makes photography workshops aboard the David B so special.
I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. My name is Sarah. I work for Jeffrey and Christine in Northwest Navigation. Christine and Jeffrey will be making our presentation along with our instructors, Alan Sanders and John D'Onofrio, for our photography workshops that we're going to be highlighting in 2025. Thank you so much for joining us. If you do have any questions, please type them into the chat room down below and we'll answer them after the presentation. And we will also be sending out video links to everybody at the end of the presentation.
Let's start. I'm Jeffrey Smith.
I'm Christine Smith.
And the two of us run the David B. And this presentation is about our photography workshops. We offer several during the summer. And John and Al are two instructors for those workshops. So all of us are going to sort of teach together or tell together what these workshops are like. Starting with
Yeah, so this is our welcome page. And so basically we'll just start with Jeffrey and I started Northwest Navigation and our trips in 2006. So we've been running for 19 years. We're going to be doing our 20th season this year. And I don't remember exactly which year it was. I think it was 2017. We got together with John and Al and decided to start doing some photography workshops. They have some amazing skills as instructors and then also as photographers. And so we're going to walk through what those trips are like. We'll give you a little bit of information about the David B itself, some of the FAQs that you might be interested in. We'll do another little recap and then we'll do some question and answer.
The two of us bought the boat in '98, did a huge restoration, and like she said, started offering tours. Our goal was to get people out into the wilderness so that they could experience that for themselves. And then when we ended up setting it up to work with John and Al, it became this beautiful mix of us being able to go into the wilderness, but also to do these photography workshops where people were learning about using Lightroom and using their cameras and all kinds of stuff like that.
And Sarah.
And I'm Sarah. I'm office person, shore support, CAT staff. I do all the reservations for Northwest Navigation. I've been doing that for about 10 years now. I was a former passenger and just it's my delight and honor to be able to answer people's questions. And so if you have any questions afterwards or during the presentation, just type them in the chat room or afterwards, I'll be happy to answer them or get an answer for you.
Yeah, my name is John D'Onofrio, and Al and I have been leading photo workshops on the David B I think we're going into maybe our 5th year, 6th year, something like that. We've also taught together at the North Cascades Institute. For me, I have sort of two passions in life. One is the art of photography, and the other is wilderness. And I am fortunate enough to have been able to make my living dealing with those two endeavors for many years now. I publish and edit a quarterly regional magazine here in Washington State called Adventures Northwest. I've written a hiking guidebook, a history book, made a film, just basically devoted my life to finding ways to express the elegant beauty of the natural world. And one of the best things that ever happened to me was hooking up with Jeffrey and Christine and discovering the David B as a way to transport myself with others to some of the most beautiful places imaginable, and to be there under exquisite circumstances, far from most folks, such a huge difference compared to sort of the industrial travel experience, which I had experienced previously. And every trip is eye-opening and cathartic and filled with beauty. And invariably, it's the one of the greatest joys of it is being surrounded by the people on the boat who are in a state of ecstasy, essentially, because of the shared beauty that we enjoy. It's one of the highlights of my life. So very happy to be a part of this, and really looking forward to next summer.
And I'm the other guy who is not John. I've been making photographs for a long time. I've been seriously making photographs for over 45 years now. I've been teaching photography for over 35 years. I started teaching in the University of Alaska in Anchorage. I taught briefly here in Bellingham, Washington at the university, Western Washington University, and I currently teach at the local community college. I had a commercial photography business for a long time, doing advertising, public relations, but mostly ended up doing work for artists and arts organizations. That was a lot of fun. I had a darkroom rental business for a while, and now I just do my own personal fine art photography, which kind of my photographic interests are pretty eclectic. I obviously photograph the landscape. I find myself more recently photographing the fine details of the landscape. I don't know how to describe that. I also do a lot of more abstract things that are kind of hard to describe, but a lot of fun. But teaching is what I really enjoy doing. Teaching is just entirely too much fun. It's just a kick to watch the light bulbs go on and watch people grow and learn and experience not just the location, the wonderful beauty that is Southeast Alaska, but watching their images change and grow. It's just too much fun, entirely too much fun. And as John said, being in Southeast Alaska is just beyond the pale. It's just and there's no better way to do that than on the David B. Yes, we're prejudiced, but it's just an incredible platform for not just photography, but for experiencing what is Southeast Alaska in particular, and actually here in the San Juans as well. It's just entirely too much fun.
And if you are interested, those QR codes in the corner will lead you to both John and Elle's websites.
And then there's the boat itself. We bought this boat and started restoring it in 1998. And we intentionally set it up to do exactly what we're doing right now. We've changed it a lot along the way, and all the changes have been with the purpose of trying to make it better to do what we're doing and better for the guests who are on board. It's very comfortable. We have 4 staterooms, so each of them is set up for 2, and then everybody has their own sink and toilet. We have a shared shower, and then we've done a lot of things because of the way photographers use the boat. There's lots of outlets all over the boat. There's electricity that's on all the time, so you can charge everything. You don't have to worry about having enough water. We have reverse osmosis. And so everything has been set up so that we can do what we're doing. Also, within that, we have maintained a lot of the character of the boat, the original 1929 character of the boat, and including the engine, and a lot of the hull and the boat itself is original. So that's the boat.
Sarah has a poll for people now, and it's what
Yes,
camera
let's-
system?
let's do a poll here. Need to get this out of my way here. All right, need to get my polls and quizzes going here. So the first poll that we're going to launch here is just to kind of get participation from you guys, so we can take a break talking for ourselves, so we can take a drink of water, what have you. And the question out here is, what type of camera system are you using? Obviously, people are very passionate about their systems, but we like to also, encourage all types. And, we have had people who've been on our trips that are using just the camera on their phone and still having a great time. So while, certainly there's a level of detail that people want to participate in, but, we do have that too. So we want to make sure that everybody can enjoy the workshops regardless of what they're using. We don't have, I think that's about everybody who's participating, who's in there. And so right now we've got sharing the results. We've got Nikon, Sony, and a camera on your phone. So there you go. And with that, I'm going to close that out, and hopefully that will be move on with the rest of the presentation.
So this upcoming season in 2025, we've got 3 photography workshops that we're doing. The first one that we have is Alaska's fjords and coastal brown bears, which takes us to Pat Creek on Admiralty Island, where we spend 2 days doing photography with some coastal brown bears in a place that is run by Alaska's Fish and Game and the U.S. Forest Service. And it's a very exciting place to be. The next trip that we have is an 8-day trip. Both these 2 trips are 8-day long trips, and it goes out to Glacier Bay National Park, which is a beautiful and remote location that we'll tell you all about here in a little bit. And then our last trip is a 4-day trip in the San Juan Islands in Washington State. And it's a little bit more of an urban trip, but we also have a lot of secluded areas and some of our favorite islands that have a lot of beautiful nature and wildlife. So the first trip we're going to talk about is the fjords and coastal brown bears. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of walk you through the itinerary a little bit. And so here's a map of what it looks like, and there's a QR code if you want to look at the web page for that. And Jeffrey, why don't you talk about the itinerary just a bit, overview?
The way that we've set this up, we like to make sure that we have 2 full days or parts of 2 full days to spend at the Bear Observatory area on Admiralty. And so we typically go there. We go somewhere close by for the first couple nights and on our way there, and then spend a couple nights in the area of the Bear Observatory. And then the last couple nights over on the right-hand side of that map is the Tracy Arm Ford's Terror Wilderness. And we always, on those trips, also have time to go one of the 2 big fjords in that area and spend some time in front of a calving glacier, and also some time in Ford's Terror, a spot that's a very little known spot, but it has a beautiful, beautiful scenery. It's an amazing steep-sided, granite walls, steep-sided fjord. It doesn't actually have a glacier at the end of it, but it's a great trip back into there to see that. So that's always a part of that same trip.
And so this is the highlight of the trip, is going out to Pat Creek. But first, what I want to do is, before we get to Pat Creek, is show you a couple of the places that we go to before we end up at Pat Creek. And one of them is a place called Taku Harbor. And John, Al, do you want to talk a little bit about what makes Taku a fun place to photograph?
It's an
Go ahead, Al.
abandoned. I'm sorry?
I said, go ahead.
It's an abandoned cannery that is currently working its way back to nature, and there's some old artifacts that are really fun and interesting, and particularly one of the things that is such as this, that is buried in the woods in the middle of nowhere, but what is really particularly interesting is it's a cannery, so they made their own cans, and the tin is from that's left over from that process is littered all over the beach, and it's almost turning to stone. It's hard to describe. It's so, the textures are just wonderful. It's just really a lot of fun to photograph.
I think it's safe to say that you'll never set foot on a beach like this anywhere else. It's really unique, and it's evocative. It kind of speaks to the ephemeral nature of things and the effect that weather has on the works of the hand of man don't last long in an environment like this. Just really, really beautiful and powerful.
For
And
me, I
this,
also really like this spot because I feel like a lot of our trip after we stop at this spot is really focused on raw wilderness kind of nature views. And this spot really highlights a big part of the history of Alaska, which is the canning times and the human history of it. I think that's also an interesting part, especially because the photos that you can take in that area are so interesting.
It's true that these are the last sort of man-made objects on the entire trip for the most part.
That's right.
And to see them as relics, which is what they are, it's pretty compelling.
So when we leave Taku Harbor, on our way to Admiralty Island, where Pat Creek is, we pass through a waterway called Stevens Passage. And in that area, we often run across humpback whales and sometimes killer whales. And then in this early spring, when this trip is, what's exciting about it is we often will have Dall's porpoises that will come in and surf our bow. And before the second day of the trip, when we're usually at Admiralty Island. What's fun about that is Admiralty is a well-forested island, lots of ancient old growth trees there. And most people don't have the opportunity to get close to the forest. So we do. And this is a picture that John took. And do you want to talk a little bit about what drew your eye to that?
Yeah, well, obviously there's a the reflection. It's almost mandala like, but the pristine nature of the land and the way the edge of the water, where the water meets the forest, creates such a beautiful, almost a veil that conceals everything behind it. And you have a sense when you look into the shadows of these forests that human footsteps have rarely echoed there. It's truly a wild domain and just so rich with life, not human life, but plant life and animal life. You just have a sense, as you always do in the wilderness, of being a visitor. But in this case, it's really exacerbated. It's humbling.
Yeah. But we don't stop at the forest's edge. One of the things that I think is very exciting is to go into the forest and to kind of explore. And being able to go in there and have time and really sort of look for yourself and see what catches your eye and kind of spend time being creative with that. So you get time to be in the forest, explore, find some new things, and just take your time, because sometimes when you do, just tiny things will start to pop out. And being able to give our passengers the time to express themselves through photography is something that we really enjoy on these trips.
It's wonderful too to have both the grandeur, the overwhelming grandeur and scale and scope, because it's a huge land. It's just, you can't wrap your head around how big the mountains are, how vast the forests are, how wide the waters are. But then at the same time, these little intimate details are there. I mean, all it takes is paying attention, looking down at your feet, and pretty much anywhere you see scenes like this that are just heartbreakingly beautiful and delicate. I love the contrast between the grand and the delicate. It's really visually exciting.
And then on the third day, we do make it to Pat Creek, and it's usually around lunchtime that we get there. And Pat Creek in the spring is a very exciting place, primarily because we get to see courtship. And so here you've got a male in the background checking out a female in the foreground. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about this time of year is that you get a very different feel for what the bears are like. And you really get to observe. We spend the whole day, we can stay there until 9 o'clock at night. And so you really get a lot of time to observe them and hopefully get the pictures that you're looking for. And we just want to show a little bit what it's like to be at Pat Creek. So here is this mud flat. So Pat Creek has a place where we enter it, and then to go to the main viewing area, which is just a meadow, we walk about a quarter mile across this mud flat. And this kind of gives you an idea of it. And here's one of our passengers looking down at bear prints that had just gone by on that tide.
Gives a whole new meaning to the expression bare feet.
Yeah, yeah. And this is the main viewing area. You can see that it has a couple logs. We stay behind the logs. There's usually a Forest Service and ADF&G representative from there that sort of keep an eye on things. And then here's looking out towards the mud flat. And so this is the area that we stay in. And to contrast with that, there are other places. Oh, do you want to say something?
I was going to finish that.
Okay.
One of the things that we've found out that we really like about this spot is that we have, our company has these limited entry permits to be in this spot that aren't there's a finite number of them that were issued, and we have to pick the dates that we're going to be there. And on any given day at this observatory, there are no more than 24 people viewing the bears, and that includes the guides and everything.
Mhm.
And so we're there very often. This is what it looks like. Occasionally there are a couple more people there, but it's never crowded. And we're the ones actually there right up close to the bears. There isn't any protection in between there. There isn't any barrier separating us from where they are. The bears are habituated and they're used to people being there. And it's just, by contrast, this is a very famous spot for watching bears. And at this point, the way it's done there is you get a beeper, and when your beeper goes off, you get to rush down there and take pictures of the bears. And I believe you have somewhere like 20 minutes or something.
Yeah, that's what I heard,
20,
something like
20 or
that.
30 minutes where you get to be there, and then you get hustled back out of there. And our bear experience is definitely a very different kind of thing than that. We're on an island that's almost entirely wilderness. The bears are close to us, and they are used to humans being there, but it's a very small group of humans.
I mean, the other thing too is rather than 20 minutes, we're there for hours. And
Right.
photographing the bears is of course why we go, and the opportunities to do that are unparalleled. But beyond that, you get to sort of inhabit the world of the bears in a significant way. You watch the behavior, you get a sense of the interactions, as you mentioned earlier, between the bears, and it's just such a different experience than sort of standing up to the rail, snapping your photo and getting out of the way so the next guy can do it. It's profound. It's amazing that you can share the space with these incredibly powerful and graceful animals, and oftentimes there's more of them than there are of us. So it's again, the only word is humbling. It's fantastic.
Yeah, so not only do we get to often see couples in courtship, but sometimes moms bring their cubs down to the creek as well. And so that's always like one of our favorite things is to see, which female has new cubs, who are the year-old cubs, and you just sort of start to get to appreciate the lives of these animals. And I think one of the greatest gifts that we have is to be ignored by bears. And they walk right past you and they just don't, really even care. And that's kind of a nifty feeling.
It's amazing the different behaviors we've seen. I mean, from the mothers nursing the cubs,
Mhm.
the males and the females courting, the cubs standing up and sort of boxing with each other.
Yeah.
It's just when you think you've witnessed everything that bears can do, they surprise you.
Yeah, there was one time when a mother was nursing her cubs not too far from us, and you could hear the cubs. They make a little purring sound like cats,
Like big
and
kittens.
that was a really amazing thing to get to hear.
Also, because we get to spend a big portion of one day and then go back the next morning and spend a bunch of that morning there, we I always like it when people come back to the boat after that second one and they're talking about the bears as if they know them.
Yeah.
They're well, and the mother we saw yesterday was doing this, and that male that we watched,
Mhm.
in the morning yesterday was doing this now, and they it's, you've developed a relationship. You've seen them, you've watched them a bunch of times. It's a very different experience than only a few, getting to spend just a couple minutes.
And I
Yeah.
think
Take a
yeah,
picture.
I think oftentimes when people spend an extended period of time with these animals, you come out with a different impression of what the bears were like, before you spent time with them than you do after. So they're a way to sort of open your mind to what these animals are truly like. Should we move on
And then
to
we
the
go
next?
on.
Yeah.
And sometimes as we leave there, there's amazing other things we see.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember this? This is John's photo as well. And you've got a good story that goes with this one.
Yeah, well, this I took this photo from the top deck of the David B. This whale swam. I mean, the whales were all around us. There were too many whales to count, but this whale came and swam around the boat and came right next to the boat. I mean, literally, you could have jumped. I could have jumped onto the whale's back from where I was standing and just hovered just there at the surface. And normally, when I leave, we basically have our center of operations is what they call the saloon in the boat, where we all keep our gear and our laptops and all the. It's where the photography stuff is centered. And whenever I leave there, I make a point of sticking an extra camera battery in my pocket, even if I'm only going to the back deck, because you just never know what's going to happen. And on this one occasion, I neglected to do that, and I'm standing on the top deck of the boat, and I took this shot, and my battery died, and I did not have one in my pocket. So this is the one shot. It's looking at it both makes me joyous, remembering the experience, and also kind of proverbial slapping my head for having forgotten the battery.
Yeah. And I also, too, now always remember to take extra batteries with me, too.
A cautionary tale.
Yes.
Absolutely. Bring it. Always have an extra battery in your
Always-
pocket.
Yeah. Yeah. So we once again will leave the mainland or leave Admiralty Island and head back towards the mainland, and we'll enter into the Tracy Arm Ford's Terror Wilderness area. And we usually spend our first night in a place called Holcomb Bay. And this was, I believe,
It's Round Island.
Round
Isn't that
Island.
Round Island?
And
Yeah, Round Island.
yeah, yeah. And so we usually spend the night there, and the next day we have a chance to go and go ashore near where this scene is taken at a place called Wood Spit. And I always like to say that I could spend more time here than I'm ever allotted. And there's just like so much to see and do here. And so it's an area that's got a lot of tide pools, it's got forest, it's got meadows, and it's a beautiful place to spend some time.
I think it's
It's a low
interesting
tide
that,
paradise.
Mhm.
yeah, the guest in this picture is taking a really really close up picture, and the view around her is what you saw in those last couple pictures. And there's just so much stuff there, too much stuff to actually take pictures of.
I think the term is an embarrassment of riches.
Right,
A
yeah,
target-rich environment.
yeah,
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
yeah. So we often will move up the beach, and this is sort of what it looks like in the forest, and it's another place that you can go in and explore. There's all sorts of amazing things, especially if you like macro photography or you like interesting perspectives. This is a beautiful place to really get up close and find things there. Sometimes I like to spend a little extra time, and we just might sit in the forest, and when we do, we often will have visitors, like this little red squirrel.
You know, it's hard to describe after having your senses just overwhelmed constantly by stuff on all sides, to go into the forest, and as Christine says, we sit quietly for a short period of time, leaning against mossy trees, and it's hard to describe how meditative, and at the same time it's meditative and invigorating to do that. It's really beautiful.
So, yeah, so once we leave the forest, there's all sorts of stuff that we can spend time on there. And if I could have 4 or 5 hours there, that would be great. We often do 2.5, 3 before we head off into probably one of my favorite places, and definitely Jeffrey's favorite place called Ford's Terror.
It's hard to describe. It's got these big, steep granite walls you can see kind of in the background in the left, and icebergs that have broken off of the nearby glacier drift into that spot and go aground as the tide goes out, and we can wander around amongst the picture or amongst the icebergs taking pictures, and it's an amazing spot to spend some time.
It's a place to be creative. And Al, do you want to talk about what inspired you with this image?
Yeah, this is my portrait of an iceberg, kind of a stranded iceberg. But so why black and white? Well, that's black and white that's how I cut my teeth, as it were. And I still do a lot of that. And what I find interesting is a photograph by definition is already an abstraction. This iceberg is much bigger than what you see here. It's also three-dimensional and it's in color. And by taking the color out, you just take that abstraction a little bit further. And now what becomes important, what I find interesting is tonal relationships, texture, shapes become way more important. And I just love the way this sitting isolated on the beach and the way it's processed is to make it jump out at you and make it real obvious that it's a portrait of this iceberg. It's just a fun place.
So we spend time ashore down on that sandbar where that iceberg was, but also there is a hike. It's a bit of a challenging hike. It's one that we do when it's dry on the rocks. It can be slippery, but it has an amazing view. It gives sort of an idea of just how spectacular this fjord is. And well, once we're back on that, once we're done with doing the shore operations in Ford's Terror, then we go for a skiff ride. But we have to wait to do the skiff ride.
This
There's
is
a
why it's called
reversing-
Ford's Terror.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the terror
Yeah.
of Ford's Terror. And we don't go through in the skiff when it's like that because of the current. But this is the spot that I really would say is probably my favorite spot in all of Southeast Alaska. And we get to go back there, take pictures. There's waterfalls. There's spots like this. There's a little teeny grassy spot in one place in the back of this section of fjords that we often go ashore on. And it's pretty magical to be back there.
You know, John Muir, who had some experience with natural beauty, right? He compared it to Yosemite Valley, and it's easy to understand why. These soaring, sheer cliffs on all sides, and waterfalls, depending on the weather. Sometimes, I don't know how many waterfalls there might be on a good day, dozens certainly. Some of them taller than the falls in Yosemite. The one thing that's different, having spent some time in Yosemite Valley, is that it's often the total population as we explore this is the 8 or 10 people that are in our skiff. There's nobody else there. There's no development of any kind. There's not even any trails on the shoreline. It's just absolute pristine wilderness. And look at the light. I mean, it's just something about Ford's Terror and the way it captures the light for photographers. I'm with you, Jeffrey. I think it's maybe my favorite place on planet Earth. Having been there a number of times now, no matter what. I've been there in all kinds of weather. I've been there when it was gray, when the mists were swirling around, when the sun was shining. It never disappoints. So spectacular.
I have to agree. This is, I mean, we're sort of beating a dead horse here, but it is probably my favorite place on the planet. It is just spectacular. As John said, it's like, imagine Yosemite Valley, but instead of in a car, you're in a boat and you're the only ones there. And those waterfalls, there's gazillions of them. And anywhere else in North America, any one of those waterfalls would have a 600-car parking lot and a gift shop. And these don't even have names.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And there's a sample of one of the many waterfalls, and I think one of the most spectacular ones back there. Once we come back out of the back of Ford's Terror, we spend the night at Ford's Terror. Then the next day we head over to a place called North Dawes, and there's some wet meadows there. While we're there, it's another beautiful example of a side fjord off the main fjord that we'll be traveling in. And what I like about it is it's only about an hour's travel from Ford's Terror, and it has a completely different feel to it. There's another sample of what the meadow can look like. And there's a really fun skiff ride that we take that will take us along the edge of the fjord. The rocks in this area are absolutely beautiful. And then we sometimes will see some small creatures and
Like this mink-like thing.
yes.
We saw one of these at a distance. This picture is, since then we've gotten a bunch of good pictures at different times, but we saw one at a distance, and and I wasn't quite sure what it was.
It
It
eluded positive identification.
Yeah, and so we determined it was a mink-like thing,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's a beautiful
It's a
mink.
beautiful mink. And there's all sorts of interesting animals that kind of are in that area. In this particular anchorage, we've seen mountain goats. One time they came down to the meadow itself, and that was a pretty exciting thing to get to see. And then the next day we move out into the main fjord again, and all of this ice has to come from somewhere. And it comes from a place called Dawes Glacier. And the icebergs are spectacular. And John, do you want to talk about this one, about photographing ice?
It's getting ridiculous as just I'm remembering each of these things, and any one of them would be enough reason to to abandon your home and get on the boat and just go. But there's so many different aesthetic delights. The floating ice it's like being in the sculpture garden of the gods. It is, of course, it reflects in the water, so you have these double images everywhere. Jeffrey has become absolutely expert at circumnavigating these flows to afford opportunities to photograph them from every direction and in every lighting situation. If I photographed nothing but ice, I would come back happy. And the varieties of it, particularly up around the Dawes Glacier, are just staggering. I mean, you bring a lot of memory cards. That's all I can say.
Yeah. And even with just the blue, if you want to address the black and white again, Al.
Yeah, it's as John said, it's a sculpture garden, and I just love the shapes. I just love the way the ice interacts with itself and the tonal relationships that are possible with the different types of ice. It's just a delight.
In the textures,
The
you know,
textures.
you have these incredibly smooth, and then at the same time, these scalloped, carved bits. Yeah, it's a feast for the senses.
And then we go up to the glacier itself. And do you want to talk about going up to the glacier, Jeffrey?
One of my favorite things to do as part of running this boat in Southeast Alaska is getting to navigate our way up to a short distance away from the front of a calving glacier and sit there for at least an hour, sometimes several hours, watching it calve. And it's just an amazing spot. It's like no other place on the planet. The area right in front of a glacier, the there's all this floating ice in the water. There's all these sounds. The landscape is very raw. There's right next to the glacier, there's no plant life at all. And then as you move away from it, there's gradually increasing amount of plant life. But right up next to it, it's the soil that's just been exposed very recently. And the whole situation is just, it's a spot that a thing you can't see anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think it's always hard with this particular trip because on one hand you have the bears and on the other hand you have the glaciers, so it's hard to know which one is the biggest highlight. But one of the things I like about this trip is that we do get both of, and if you include the whales, some of the most spectacular offerings that Southeast Alaska has. And so we'll come to a close with the Alaska's fjords and coastal brown bears. And here's a little recap of what it is. Our 2025 Bears trip is currently sold out. We do have a waiting list for it, and we are accepting reservations for next year. The dates for 2026 are the same as this year, which is May 25th through June 1st. And if you have any questions about that, the QR code will take you to the webpage there for the Pat Creek trip. And Sarah's always happy to answer all your questions about Pat Creek. She's been on that trip, and I know that she likes it. She's going to go back at some point here, and we'll enjoy that.
So moving on to our next of our photography trips, we offer a trip that goes to Glacier Bay National Park and back. It starts and ends in the Juneau area. And Glacier Bay National Park is also like the spot that we go to on Admiralty Island in that it's limited entry. There's a limited number of small boats like ours that have permits through the national park system to be allowed to operate there. The area is vast, and we're, with our permits, generally supposed to be keeping away from each other so we don't see other boats while we're doing this. There are very few people in this really large wilderness area that's an amazing national park. And Christine, tell us about this picture. Tell us the story
Yeah,
of
the
this
story of
picture.
that picture. Yeah. So one morning I had just gotten up. I think it was 4 in the morning, 5 or 4 in the morning. I was just getting coffee ready and the light was nice. And I always keep my camera close to the galley door. And I'd gone outside. One of the things I like to do first thing in the morning before the generator's on and everything's really quiet, I like to take a little sound recording of what the day looked like or sounded like. So I had my camera out and I was taking some pictures and recording the sounds and a little bit. And so my settings were surprisingly good for that time. And I went back in, started some coffee, and I turned around and I saw a little bit of movement on this. So you can kind of tell there's a little tidal spit right there. And I had earlier in the morning heard the crows making a big fuss. There's a night roost there. And so I just kind of thought, oh, there must be a, eagle nearby or something. And when I turned around to look, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a wolf on the beach. And so I got super excited. I grabbed my camera, I just snapped a couple shots. And basically by the time I was done taking a couple pictures and I turned around to think to myself, I should go get other people up or something. And then he was gone. And it was just one of those split second things where when you're sometimes paying attention, but not always fully paying attention, really magical things happen.
As a photographer, capturing an image like that, I mean, would just validate however many years you spent practicing and however much you spent on buying gear, it was all totally justified in the second you pressed that shutter down.
Yeah.
Here's a little map of the trip. We, like I said, start and end in Juneau. There's a day of getting out there, a day and a half of getting to the park itself. The park has two long arms up to the north there, and we're able to go spend some time in both the east and the west arm of the park there. The east arm is really interesting. It has very few boats that visit it. The cruise ships don't go there. Even the small passenger boats skip that spot. And so we're often up there with no other boats for the whole stretch.
So after we leave Juneau, the activity for both day 1 and day 2 are basically getting to the park, and that gives us a lot of time to search for humpback whales. And what's really exciting about the area that we're traveling in is it's an area where the whales will do this cooperative feeding they call bubble netting. And so quite often we do get to experience that, and it's always really exciting when that's something that we run into.
I've been on a number of whale watch trips, like off the Oregon coast and stuff in my life. But so far on any of those, I fail to be able to look at the roof of humpbacks' mouths the way you can do here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to get to see the baleen.
We, depending on the schedule of the trip, we sometimes do and sometimes don't have time to stop through at the park headquarters. They have a really beautiful skeleton of a humpback whale there that you can wander around and get an idea of the size of humpback whales.
But then South Marble Island is, if you're familiar with Glacier Bay, is a pretty famous place for seeing puffins and sea lions, and we've seen humpbacks around there, and lots of other different shore or birds. In the spring, the wildflowers can be quite dramatic.
Of course, the puffins.
The puffins, everybody loves puffins.
That's why you're there, for puffin
Yeah.
pictures.
And then
This is taken right off the deck of the boat. This picture
Yeah.
is right there at South Marble Island from the boat.
yeah, and then we'll go to an anchorage that very often has sea otters in it. And I think this is a picture that John took. And I think the next picture, this is that same place where the wolf was walking across. And it's one of the reasons it's one of my favorite anchorages is that it's so outstandingly beautiful.
Every night has a view like this.
Yeah.
Well, a different view.
Right, but I mean, it's a spectacular view.
We carry this view along with us.
Yeah.
A different view,
Yeah.
equally spectacular.
Yeah.
Oh,
Can
stop.
you tell a difference?
Yeah. There's a different night.
It's a different night. This is up Muir Inlet outside of McBride Inlet. So McBride Inlet is a side fjord that has a tidewater glacier in it. And it leaves lots of little icebergs on the beach. And it's a place that's really fun to explore.
A plethora of ice sculpture,
Yeah.
Ice gardens.
ice gardens.
I love the concept of the ice gardens.
Yeah.
It's so much fun to just wander around the beach, going from sculpture to sculpture. That's my idea of a good time.
And while we're there, there are several different birds if you're interested in bird photography. So, like the oyster catchers, there's a couple oyster catchers that have been nesting pretty much in the same place for as long as we've been going there. And then some other birds that are interesting are semi-palmated plovers and spotted sandpipers. And most of the time, we just see paw prints, but once in a while, you might actually see the bear.
You sure that's not Jeffrey in a bear costume?
It's totally different in a bear costume. Figure
You're
this
looking
out.
at me.
And then the plant life also, if you enjoy plants, like this oyster leaf is also a lot of fun.
We're able on our skiff ride in that area to get quite close to observe a kittiwake colony. And this is a pretty cool picture of some chicks getting fed.
This is what's nice about being there in the spring.
Yeah.
And there are like hundreds of this. It's repeated in rocks all over the cliffs. It's it's hard to decide where to point the camera.
And this is McBride Glacier. And there's a reason that Glacier Bay is called Glacier Bay, because there are several tidewater glaciers within the bay, and we like to hit up all of them. And so this would be the first glacier that we would be going to. So after we finish at McBride and Muir Inlet, we go into the main part of the arm. And so this would be the next following day. And there's a place called Gloomy Knob. And for whatever reason, the mountain goats there are usually easy to find, and they come right down to the water's edge at times. So this is kind of a example of some of the goats that we might see on that day.
I can't tell for sure with that picture, but isn't that taken right at almost at the water's edge?
Yeah, it was like
It was like
10 feet
straight
up.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
10 feet out, 10 feet up from the water's edge and straight out from the boat, a couple hundred feet away. If that.
Yeah.
100 feet away.
Yeah, it's really
There were
cool.
actually a couple really close to it that we didn't even see until we were right up
Yeah.
on top of them, practically. Oops.
And so the fourth and fifth days are pretty much spent, I guess, like chasing ice, I guess might be the way of saying it. This anchorage right here, we kind of have several anchorages to choose from. It'll depend on the weather, which ones we go to. But we always want to get a good view of Johns Hopkins Glacier. We also have Lamplugh Glacier to visit, and then Reed Glacier. And then on the fifth day, I think it is, we'll go up Tar Inlet over to Marjorie Glacier and the Grand Pacific. So this gives you sort of an idea of this crossroads area where there's just pretty much glaciers all around us.
And these mountains are gigantic, right? How tall are these? This is the Fairweather range.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're all in the 9,000 to how tall is Fairweather?
Fairweather is 15.
Yeah, they're all in that 9 to 15,000 range.
There's a number of them that are
All
over 12. Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
This spot in here, I think, is sort of quintessential Glacier Bay. It's what you would come to Glacier Bay to see. Johns Hopkins Glacier at the end of it, but that whole fjord all the way along has all these like snow patches on the sides, lots of ice fields, lots of little glaciers, little hanging glaciers up in the mountains around there. And it's just an amazing spot.
Yeah. So this is at Lamplugh Glacier. It's another ice garden that we go visit. And I was going to take this out, but I forgot, John. Sorry.
This is your photographer.
Having a good day.
Yeah, it needs to be pointed out that generally it's not t-shirt weather there. This was an exceptionally warm day.
Yeah.
But it can happen. You never know.
True.
Right.
And one of the amazing things about Lamplugh is that there's a little lagoon in front of it, and the ice gardens that pushes at high tide, it pushes the ice up onto this moraine. So we walk around on the moraine, but you can also walk up close to this really shallow lagoon in front of the glacier. And then this is Reed Glacier, and I think this is your photo, isn't it?
Yeah, this is Reed Glacier is what's interesting to me about Reed Glacier is I was kayaking here in the 70s and it was tidewater. And now it has receded back. Oh, God, it's what, a half a mile back from the water. It's receding quite rapidly.
I'm
Here
gonna
you
give
can
you
see how
a
far
picture
away
of
it
the
is.
mud flat.
Yeah,
It's some beautiful mud.
We're
it's
able to
beautiful mud.
walk across this mud flat and get right up to the face of the glacier.
And then the next day is Marjorie and Grand Pacific. Here you can see people photographing from the boat. Marjorie Glacier is the bright white one. And the Grand Pacific is sort of hidden under some dirt, but that is a for real glacier out there. And this is a wonderful place. We have a couple different areas that we can anchor, and then a number of places that we can go ashore.
As
Good to see.
Marjorie has receded, the sandbar has started to show up in front of it and sort of off to the side. And we've started going there and going ashore and walking around. This is what it feels like when you're right there.
And this is taken several years ago from the David B, where we were anchored about a mile away. I was on the boat, kind of watching what was going on and keeping an eye out at lunch at the time. And then I could see that Jeffrey had taken the skiff over, and everybody was there watching the glacier. And I had my camera with my big lens on it, and I got this picture that I just absolutely love because it shows the glacier calving and the perspective of six people and Jeffrey in the skiff. And the skiff, I'll just note, is a custom skiff that was made for everybody to be able to stand in it. It's super stable, goes really fast. It's a really amazing skiff. But at the same time, I was also listening to the marine radio, and there was a cruise ship behind us, kind of out in the center of the fjord. And they were exchanging. There were two cruise ships. One was leaving and one was coming in. The other one just had mentioned that there were a bunch of people in a skiff standing in it. And so we thought that that was kind of a funny story.
From the skiff, we could turn around and look back at the distant cruise ships who were watching the same thing that we were watching, but watching it from a vast distance away. But most of them were photographing us.
Yeah.
You could see that they were just thinking, look at those people, look at the experience they're having.
Yeah.
They're probably a mile away. We were a quarter mile away.
Yeah, and so this sort of gives idea of what it's like to sit in the skiff on really nice days at Marjorie. It's always so much fun to take the skiff up there. If it's a rainy day, then we'll just take the big boat up there and watch from there. You can stay a little bit drier that way, but the best way to get to watch that glacier is in the skiff. And then moving on from glaciers, Glacier Bay, the reason it has so many glaciers is that they have these just beautiful mountains that, are a never ending, fantastic subject. And here again is one of Al's shots.
Too much fun. I just
Yeah.
love the clouds. I love the mountains. I love the textures. I love the shapes. I love the tonal quality.
Yeah. And then as we head back towards Juneau, once again, more whale watching. We usually spend our last night in Glacier Bay in a place called Shag Cove, which is just this wonderful little nook of an anchorage. And that's kind of heading into it. And you go deep into that fjord in there, and you're surrounded by these mountains.
So a little recap of the Glacier Bay trips. We do have space for this year on the June 5 to 12 trip. It's good for wildlife, it's good for landscape photography, and you'll spend lots of time on the trip turning your pictures into amazing, stunning works of art, as it says here. And but that's all because you'll get a bunch of information and instruction on using Lightroom to post-process.
Then with that, I think Sarah has another poll for us.
Okay, well, yeah, let's give our presenters just a minute to take a glass of water here, and we're gonna do another poll where we ask our participants to kind of share what are some of the things that you really like to launch this one. So what is it that you like to capture? Obviously, we've shared so many different types of subjects here, and we just, if you want to click on which ones, and you can do multiple choice. You don't have to pick, you can pick them all, but we'll give it a minute and give people a chance to answer what is it they really like. And we'll give a few more people a chance to to click in here, and just a few more seconds. And then I think everybody has answered here. And so we're going to share the results. So in general, it looks like everyone wants the landscapes, the flora, and then right after that are the wildlife and the macro, and then of course textures. So thank you very much for participating in that. And I'm going to stop sharing that and we can move on to the next workshop.
Which is the San Juan Islands.
In the fall, when we come back to Washington, we offer a photography trip in the San Juan Islands. And this one is shorter. It's a 4-day trip, but it also has a lot of the same instruction. And we have lots of opportunities to go ashore in various places and get great pictures. Here's a little map of that. The trip starts and ends in Bellingham up on the right. And we go through the San Juans. There's a couple different islands that we stop at that are state park spots that are uninhabited. There's a great place that we go on another island that we get to go walk to a lighthouse that has some great views. And then depending on what happens, oftentimes we spend the last night at the south end of the San Juan Islands.
And here's a picture that John took. And I like you're describing this as an iconic shot of the San Juan Islands. And if you want to elaborate on that a little bit more and where it's at and what's interesting to you about this spot.
Sure. I think that generally the San Juan Islands are seen, certainly by photographers, as maybe the premier archipelago in the United States for natural beauty. I don't remember how many islands there are, something like 100, many of them quite small, most of them uninhabited, and this beautiful marine environment around them full of marine wildlife. And then close at hand, the volcano of Mount Baker, the glacier carved peaks of the North Cascades, visible north into Canada, the Canadian Cascades. So it's both sort of a maritime experience and also an alpine experience in a way, because you're surrounded by these beautiful mountains. And I think you described it earlier as more urban. Well, that's really quite relative, because the places we go are not, there's not very many people there. As Jeffrey said, some of these islands are marine parks, and there is no way to get there if you don't have a boat, essentially. And consequently, we go places where we're all alone oftentimes. And, it's like sort of morning, noon, and night. It's similar in some ways to Alaska. There's no part of this trip where you just have to kind of grunt through a 5 or 6 hour passage through something that's mundane. There are beautiful things to photograph absolutely every step of the way.
This is one
Like
of
these.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Tafoni. I'll talk about this for a minute because I'm a fanatic for Tafoni. Tafoni is an Italian word that refers to this weathering process that's unique to sandstone and salt water. It occurs in various locations all around the world. There are people who take pilgrimages to various Tafoni sites to photograph because it's so uniquely almost surreal and fantastic for catching the light. When the light is good, it's like nothing you've ever seen. Among Tafoni aficionados, some of these islands, particularly Susha, Peytos, and Meisha, the northern marine islands in the San Juans, are world renowned. People come from all over the globe to photograph this stuff. Yeah, it's as I say, it's real. It's just exquisitely beautiful. Another example of what I was saying before about how on the one hand you have this enormous grandeur of these snow-covered mountains and islands stretching out into the distance, and then on the other hand you have these tiny, exquisite little tableaus of carved stone that you can zoom in on. And here again, Jeffrey has become an expert on taking the skiff along the most dramatic stretches of Tafoni, and we cruise along very slowly and very closely, and we try to do it at the best lighting of the day. The conditions are just perfect, and people come away with photographs. Most people, I think, who sign up for this trip, this is not what they have in mind, but invariably people are just thrilled with the things that they're able to photograph here.
Yeah, so much of it's sort of otherworldly. And
Speaking
speaking
of
of
otherworldly,
otherworldly, yeah, so besides some really interesting abstract rocks that you can see and just kind of lose your mind in, there's a lot of interesting wildlife in the San Juan Islands. Sea lions, these Steller sea lions, we see those. And this time of year, which would be in October, we start getting a lot more birds migrating through, so like black turnstones. And then in the fall, a lot of the islands. This year was an incredible year for mushrooms, and there's always something interesting to find. Susha, in particular, has miles and miles of trails, and you can just kind of we go ashore, everybody kind of moves off on their own, then we come back and regroup, and it's just amazing to see some of the beauty that people come back with. And this kind of gives you an idea of what the anchorage is like there. In the fall, this was over on Patos Island where that lighthouse was. There are a bunch of trails on that. And so not only do we do a nice drive-by of it, but we do like to go ashore and see what we can find there. So here's a foggy day on Patos, and one of our photographers in action. Bird life is also good in the San Juans, like I said earlier. We get lots of herons. They're always fun to photograph. And then photographers, they're always fun to photograph.
I'm never going to hear the end of this one.
I
Even
know.
though
Well,
I was wearing the hiking pants that had the zip off legs, and it was really hot. So I unzipped the legs, but I was too lazy to take off my boots. So I didn't hear the end of this. Although they shamed me into sitting down and actually taking off my boots and taking them off, taking the
yeah.
legs off. But
So yeah,
yeah,
so we always have some fun with these guys.
This is also one of the things I like about this is this particular island. You can go for a walk on it, and it's kind of the whole thing is like on a country lane. There's amazing stuff to take pictures of, like these yaks that are being raised there. But it's also you're kind of like in this rural, pastoral kind of farmland situation, and it abuts the edge of a really beautiful forest. So you can so it's all kinds of contrasts all together there.
Yeah, it's pretty idyllic.
Yeah, this kind of highlights some of the contrasts that you see in the San Juan Islands. And for those of us who are familiar with the Northwest, the madrona tree might be maybe everybody's favorite tree. I don't know, it's my favorite tree.
absolutely spectacular. My favorite tree as well.
Yeah. And so that bark, it peels naturally. And so it gives you these beautiful textures, just soothing colors, and they're just gorgeous trees. And the San Juan Islands also has beautiful landscapes. And John, do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, this is just sort of gives you a sense of the dreamlike quality that you can discover here, where you get sort of that ocean mist, and then the islands just recede layer after layer after layer, and it's so soft and it's so quiet. It's very easy to just sort of lose yourself in the beauty of the place.
Yeah. While we do spend time ashore, we see some unique animals as well sometimes. And so this barred owl was out middle of the day and was just perched right at the trailhead that we were at. And I think this one's John's picture. And we just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
And he sat there
And
for quite a while and posed for it.
did, yeah, yeah. I think
I think
everybody
he
eventually moved on to do something else, and the owl was still there.
he was on the payroll, somebody's payroll.
Yeah, yeah. And then on the last day of the trip, we're never like this 3 nights, and we're never really sure exactly where the third night will be. We have a number of different options, but they're all my favorite. I have a hard time with the word favorite, but always a favorite spot is Cypress Island. Usually heading back into Bellingham in the morning. This is Madrona Tree in the foreground and the Cone Islands in the background. And again, John, do you want to elaborate on the Cone Islands and Cyprus?
Yeah, I mean, if you were going to, create with CGI some kind of fantasy island scape, I mean, it would look like the Cone Islands. There's all this series they look like cones, and they have these dramatic weathered trees on them, seals lounging around on the rocks. And we typically in the skiff, we will circumnavigate these, go from one to the other. Incredible forests of seaweed in between to photograph. And then not visible in this photo, but the amazing snow cone of Mount Baker in the distance is just really beautiful. And one of the things that you just said, Christine, bears mentioning is that this is a place we often go. What we do on these trips is rather than have necessarily a set, basically a list of things that we're going to check off the list on each trip, although there are places we do go every time, of course. Jeffrey and Christine are brilliant at ascertaining what the conditions are like and improvising in just small but very important ways to put us in exactly the right place at the right time. And that's certainly been the case here in the Cone Islands on numerous occasions.
That will wrap up the San Juan Islands. And what I really like about the San Juan Islands is they're 4 days and they are jam-packed. So everything we do in almost everything we can do in an 8-day trip, we try to pack into a 4-day trip. So it's a lot, but it goes by too fast. And we have our last poll before we get into some of the nuts and bolts of the David B itself and wrap up.
Okay, so we just thought we would ask our participants here, what kind of photo workshop experience do you have? Have you attended others with us here on the David B, or, you've never done, but you're interested? Just try to give us a chance to interact with our participants just a little bit. So feel free to answer. There's no wrong answer here. And I think that's it. Okay. So right now we've got never but interested, and then only one photography workshop so far, and then 3 workshops so far. So that's great. Thank you for that. All right.
And then we have sort of a quick overview. We'll go through these kind of quickly. What's sort of a typical day on the David B, and what's it like to shoot on the David B? So our days, we can shoot from the boat. So here's some dollop porpoises riding on the bow. We can shoot landscape stuff from the boat as well. Here's a waterfall in Tracy Arm that we had that you can get up really close to, and Jeffrey maneuvers it super deep off the end, and we can get up really close to that. Do a lot of shore excursions. So here's McBride Inlet. Everybody has their tripods and getting up close with some ice. And then also, as we showed earlier, kind of exploring landscapes near tidewater glaciers. And then there's a lot of fun inside. So this is the wheelhouse. We're underway. And then here's sort of the classroom area. Al and John devote a lot of time to helping people get the fundamentals of Lightroom and answering people's questions, working with, if you're skilled in Lightroom, you have lots of time to work on your photos on your own. And so that's a very important part of the trip, that when we're underway, a lot of times, or sometimes in the evenings, we'll spend time working on the photos and sharing through critiques, or sort of what it looks like when people are hard at work.
Half
Those
the
are
fun
old
of
curtains that
photography
we
is
used
what
to have.
happens to the images after they leave the camera.
And everybody's got smiles.
There's the other half of the fun.
Yeah.
There's the other half of the fun.
Yeah.
Oops,
And
sorry.
John Al, do you want to talk about the importance of printing?
One of the things that I think is unique about these workshops that we do, and I don't know if other workshops do this, is on the last day, we have a printer on board and we make prints for everybody. Everybody goes home with a 12 by 18 print of an image of your choice, suitable for framing, as they say. Printing there's nothing to compare with having a tangible object of your image that you can hold in your hand. There's no comparison. Having a print is everything about there was a time when if you didn't have a print, you didn't have a photograph. Now that's not necessarily the case, but there's no comparison with seeing an image on a screen and seeing an image that you can hold in your hand as a print, especially something of that size.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think we're unique in that. I don't know that other workshops do this.
Yeah, because it's a big printer.
It's a big printer.
Yeah. And then to kind of wrap up the day in the life of the David B, I love this picture. This is in Tar Inlet in front of Marjorie Glacier when a big cruise ship came in behind us, and you can kind of see the scale and the difference of what we do versus what the big ships do. If you look, you can kind of see there are people on the rail of the boat behind us, and our passenger there is just having a really good time. And so that's kind of the difference between that industrial scale tourism versus what we offer.
There's
And then
another thing we offer.
Yeah, I brought a lot of food. We'll run through a couple of these pictures. I spent a lot of time in the galley making sure that all those creative juices are well fed and you don't ever have to think about eating. I like to focus as much as I can on seafood from Southeast Alaska, but some other stuff as well. And I do also do specialty diets. So if you have something that you can't dote and won't eat, if you work with Sarah ahead of time, then I can always be flexible in what the menu is.
I often recommend that people show up with stretch pants.
Because you'll eat a lot.
Yeah.
Yep.
Those were side striped shrimp in that previous picture.
This is halibut.
This is
The halibut
Alaska halibut.
and some Dungeness crab.
I might point out fresh baked sourdough bread every day.
Yep.
Christine went through a pastry program at a culinary college.
Mhm.
And so handmade croissants
Which don't last very long.
and pain au chocolat,
Yeah.
always part of the trip.
And then, if you're interested in what the boat looks like, here's a little detailed tour of the David V itself.
This is the wheelhouse where I spend a lot of my time. Everybody is welcome to come up to the wheelhouse and hang out in the wheelhouse. I actually like it when people are there. I see a lot of stuff first because of where I am. And when people are in the wheelhouse, they can get an idea of what that's like. There's a big bench in there. I think people who are up there get to see stuff as well. Both of these pictures are of the same set of stairs going down to the cabins down below. In addition to the heads or bathrooms in the cabins, there's also this shared bathroom that has bathtub, shower, and sink and toilet. And if you go down the main companionway down through there, you can go to the cabins. One of them has this arrangement of bunk beds, and then we have two that can either be a queen size bed or bunk beds, and then one that's set up just as a queen size bed. So in total, we have room for 8 guests in 4 cabins.
And here's one of the cabins set up as a queen. And then the next, the next image shows what it's set up as bunk beds. It's coming out of the cabin area and we'll go up into the saloon, I believe, next. Yeah. And this is where all the photography instruction goes on. And you can see back into the galley for theirs looking up to the wheelhouse. And then this is 2 side views.
Sort of in the middle of the boat. We put this in a little while ago. It's always good to have lots and lots and lots of coffee.
Yeah.
This is our galley, looking down into it from that middle section of the boat. That's the settee table that everybody can sit at. And this is Christine's wonderful wood-burning cook stove that she makes all the meals on.
Did I mention fresh sourdough bread every day?
Right? Yeah.
Down below, this is our original engine from 1929 that we meticulously maintain to power the boat.
And this is on the back deck. We often see whales, and it kind of gives you an idea of what it's like. We have covered decks. So if we're underway and it might be a little misty or something, you've got a nice dry place to take pictures.
If you need to be out there in your orca pajamas,
Yeah.
it's nice and dry under the cover there.
And that's
This is what it looks like in that spot. Up on the upper deck, we have a big area that you can hang out, as well as the spot where the skiff is parked at this point. That's our skiff that we take ashore. This is what it feels like to be in a group of photographers that are spending their entire 8 days thinking about and talking about photography.
Yeah.
On the beach in Glacier Bay.
There's nothing like sharing beauty to build camaraderie.
Here's some testimonials, and that's it.
Thank you very much for listening to our presentation
And letting us go on and on about how much we love our trips.
and how amazing it is.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop the focus mode so we can kind of see the videos of the presenters. And so the one thing I wanted to just make it clear for everybody that this is not your only chance to ask questions. But if you do want to ask a question as a participant, feel free to type them into the meeting chat to everybody, and we can try to answer any questions you might have. And if there are, once we've answered all the questions, then we might also open it up afterwards. We'll stop the recording and then make it so that if you want to hang out with everybody a little bit afterwards, you're welcome to do that too. So are there any questions? Feel free to just type them into the chat. Make sure you're typing them and sending them to everyone so I can see them and read them off for everybody. And then, of course, if you think of any questions later, feel free to email me, and we will be sending the link out a few days after this and making it available for everybody. So as of right now, I'm not seeing any questions. You guys seeing any questions on your side? One time.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm really glad that everyone was able to join us. Thank you so much. We really enjoy these kinds of presentations. It gives us a great chance to just share this with potential passengers and longtime passengers. We've got people who've been in this, who've been on the trip several times, and people who are the first time. So definitely, if you think about anything, just feel free to contact us later. Any last words or anything like that from Jeff and Christine or Al or John before we stop the recording?
I'll say one thing that, I'm passionate about, the first thing I said in this presentation was that my passions are the art of photography and the spectacular sense of being in the wilderness. And for me, it just doesn't get any better than this. But people who know me won't be surprised at that, because that's sort of just the way I am. But what I've really been delighted about is being with people and seeing this in the eyes of others, seeing people really connect with the landscape and truly, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, having one of the greatest experiences of their lives. We have evaluation forms that we hand out at the end of the week, and you'd be amazed how many people write on the evaluation forms that it is a high point of their life. And there's lots of ways to get to see this kind of stuff, but I cannot imagine any way to bring you into the realm of such beauty that would compete with a week on the David B. It's just, you gotta experience it for yourself. I recognize some of the names I see there, and I dare say that they would agree with this. It's truly life-changing and a one-of-a-kind experience.
So I do have one question from one of our participants, a couple of questions. It's primarily with regards to, we've had this before, our passengers who may or may not have a lot of experience with boats, or they have mobility issues or things like that. Should they be concerned of any balance issues or seasickness? Those are kind of the two common questions that I get. I'll let you guys answer that, and how you deal with that.
Yeah, I always feel if people are concerned about motion sickness, seasickness, that they should just always bring something that they're comfortable with taking. If there's something your doctor prescribes or something, where for the most part, we're in pretty protected waters. There's not a whole lot of movement. Sometimes people come up in the morning and they're like, I can't believe I didn't feel anything all night at all. And so it's a pretty, it's a pretty stable boat, and the waters that we're in are generally protected. We do, have some motion here and there, but I really feel like if you feel like you're going to be worried about that, the best way to make yourself sick is to not bring anything with you. I do have Bonine on board if you don't have anything with you, but for the most part, that's it. Do you have anything else to say about motion sickness, about the waters?
All of these trips involve, moving around in a boat. So there is at least some level that there might be rougher weather, and we've experienced rougher weather on some of these trips. But this area of Southeast Alaska that we go, as well as in the San Juans, most of the trip is in very protected waters. And so it would be unusual for somebody to not feel well from motion sickness on one of our trips for very much of it, for sure.
Yeah.
So. And I think the thing too is that because you're anchoring every evening, any motion you might get just from, motoring, that you get a break from that every day too, which is, I think, helpful for a lot of people. They think, oh, we're just going to be going nonstop and you'll never get a break. And I think that really does help. But certainly, with regards to mobility, I mean, obviously you've seen some of the, these are not developed areas. So, you do want to have a sense of mobility to be able to walk safely. We do provide we can provide hiking sticks, but there is going to be climbing up into the skiff or climbing down the stairs to get to the cabin. So, you want to make sure that you're comfortable with that too. And we always want to make sure when people ask me, I don't try to sugarcoat that, there is a level of ability that you need to be comfortable with enjoy yourself.
For sure, on the trip, the Pat Creek Bears trip, we do have to walk a ways across the beach. We're not in any hurry, but it is somewhere between a quarter and a half a mile over to the viewing area, and the same on the way back. And so there is that is a limiting factor maybe for some people.
Well, that wraps up our conversation about our photography workshops. We hope this gives you a better idea about what makes our trips so unique, from the incredible destinations like Pat Creek and Glacier Bay National Park, as well as the San Juan Islands of Washington State, to the amazing people who help bring it all to life. Whether you're looking to refine your skills as a photographer, connect with nature, or just experience something truly unforgettable, we would love to have you join us on one or even all three of these adventures. If you would like to learn more, visit us at northwestnavigation.com or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or sign up for our newsletter for photos and trip highlights. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Sarah. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope to see you with us soon. Until next time, fair winds.